What's going on, Sports Wars? We're here. We're live for some Monday evening quarterback. And finally, we can talk about who's actually going to be in the college football playoff, not just make predictions like we've been doing each and every week about the last half of college football season. And I know one person who's pretty excited about that, and that is Jeremy D-Day Cobra. What's going on, man?
Cincinnati wanted Bama. You're going to get Bama. And I can't wait to watch it all play out. I mean, Alabama's basically got a first round bye here in the college football playoff, so I'm good with that. But in all seriousness, I do think Alabama probably will go into that game a little overconfident, and that will probably hurt them some. It's going to be a closer game than people expect. But yeah, I'm excited about it. Alabama took care of business with Georgia. If Alabama does win, and if Michigan wins, I'm going to talk a lot of shit to El Presidente in that week leading to the next. So I'm tagging him on Twitter. I'll be calling him out. So Barnes has a link. If he's available, he will pop in here. I don't know if he's going to be able to, but he does have a link. So
yeah, we all know that Robert's really busy. We're lucky to have him as much as we do over here on Sports Wars for sure. So I'm sure if he has some time, he is going to pop in here. But let's just get it out of the way. Alabama, once again, SEC champs. And Jeremy, even though you decided to wear your Atlanta Braves hat, I'm sure you're still pretty happy about that.
I am very, very happy about it. Yeah, I didn't think Alabama would play that well going into that game. And Nick Saban did what Nick Saban does. He took that rat poisoning and he manipulated the media's nonsense, and he used it to motivate the hell out of his team. Plus, having a very poor showing in Auburn, I think, really helped motivate that team as well. Because if they would have just beat Auburn 45-3 or something like that, Alabama could have come into that way overconfident, and that type of stuff does matter. Like, confidence does matter, and I don't know if a lot of people that are normies to sports understand that. When you go back to even something like the 2007 New England Patriots. The reason they lost to the Giants was simple. It's because the Giants almost beat them in the last game of the regular season. And that gave them so much confidence, you know what I mean? Going into the playoffs and then facing New England. Obviously, the game plan had to work. They put a ton of pressure on Tom Brady. They held the Patriots to under 20 points that game. So all those things factored into it. But the confidence they got was huge. And so Alabama playing like dog shit against Auburn set them up to play as well as they did versus Georgia.
Yeah, and, by that same token, even though they did play well versus Georgia, if you're looking at it from the other side and you're sitting in Cincinnati's perspective, Cincinnati, who has literally nothing to lose, is going to be first time they've been really in this type of position, to be sure. But also they got to feel like they're the ones that are being looked upon like they're nothing. They're the ones who no one's taking seriously, and they really do have nothing to lose. Everyone expects Alabama to probably blow them out of the water. And seeing how Alabama has struggled this year, obviously Bryce Young most likely going to win the Heisman. There's not too many people who are saying otherwise right now. But Bryce Young still is very young, and we've seen him struggle this year. We've seen him make some really stupid mistakes, and all it takes a few for Cincinnati to capitalize. And all of a sudden, Nick Saban might be singing a different tune in the post-game press conference.
That's true.
But, overall, I think a lot of us expected that it was going to be a really close, really tight game between Alabama and Georgia. They really took care of business. And I was expecting, if Alabama won by that much, that it was going to be maybe like a 24-10 game or something. I really did not see them putting up that many points. Obviously, they kind of pulled away late in the fourth quarter. But what is it, 31 points by the end of the third quarter, something like that? So
yeah, they put some distance. I mean, look, Georgia, the state of Georgia is just, they really have a problem playing in big games, whether that's professional or college. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. And so I'm loving everything that I'm seeing. The momentum is moving in the right direction. Plus the Georgia-Michigan game, I think, is a hell of a good matchup. So I think we got a good match. I think we got three of the best four teams in the country in the college football playoffs. Cincinnati, while they don't deserve to be in there, at the same time, they did what they needed to do to get in there, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
There's not anyone else that took care of business in the way that they needed to. You know what I mean? If Oklahoma State wins, if Oklahoma State wins against Baylor, there's a good chance that they could have got it. There really is. I think that if they had taken care of what were the 16th ranked Baylor team, somewhere around there, if they had really impressed against them, I think they had a chance of beating out Cincinnati. And that would have been kind of crazy if it did happen. And Cincinnati would be probably pretty pissed. But at the same time, I could see the committee wanting to do that. Oh, again, Oklahoma State also isn't a name, a big draw. Like, I'm sure if they could have put Notre Dame in there, if Notre Dame didn't fucking lose to Cincinnati,
they'd be
I think that the committee would have done everything. If they had lost to like some other random person early on in their schedule and not Cincinnati, they would be in. But you just can't justify putting them in over a Cincinnati team.
Yeah, I agree. So I think the most deserving teams based on what we've experienced college football season are pretty much in there. I think that's a good way to frame it. The four most deserving teams based on where we're at are in. So, and there's not a lot of controversy surrounding it. You don't hear a lot of people complaining. You know what I mean? So no. Ohio State had 2 losses. Notre Dame lost to Cincinnati. You know, Oklahoma State had their chance. Yeah, so I think it's at least we've got that going for us. And I'm not a fan of expanding. I know you want to expand it to 8. I'm not a fan of expanding it beyond 4, which I was never a fan of even introducing the college football playoff. But, you know, here we are, and Alabama's still been in there every year but 1 year. The SEC continues to be, you know, just a dominant conference in college football. So.
Yeah, and I think if we expand it to 8, there likely is some years that we would get 3 SEC teams. Yeah, you know, I think you'd end up with 3 SEC teams, 2 Big Ten teams, a Big 12, a Pac-12, and then whatever. You know what I mean? Then you're Cincinnati, then you're UCF 1 year, or whatever it may be.
Yep.
But on the other side of the bracket, because we knew these were going to be the matchups, this really couldn't have gone any other way once Michigan won and Alabama won. On the other side of the ticket, on the other side of the bracket, we got Michigan and Georgia. And Michigan has rolled the past 2 weeks. They struggled early on. You can't deny they struggled early this season. Harbaugh was feeling it even though they were winning all their games. And then to give up that comeback loss, effectively, give up that big lead over Michigan State and lose against Michigan State. I think a lot of us counted them out, especially knowing they'd have to play Ohio State. But they did what they had to do. They really looked good against Ohio State, and then they blew the doors off Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. How do you think they stack up against the Georgia team that you just watched, Jeremy?
My gut feeling is that Michigan's going to probably get smoked. I feel like Michigan's going to get smoked, and part of me wants Michigan to win because I do want to talk a lot of shit to Portnoy because he is running his mouth like only he does. And I totally understand what he's doing. He's putting the entertainment value into it. He's talking so much shit. And I want to see Michigan, you know, go against Alabama in the national championship. But if I'm a betting man, I'm betting on Georgia and Alabama taking care of business. And I think I'm more confident in Georgia versus Michigan than I am Alabama versus Cincinnati. And what I mean by that is I don't think like everyone's going to expect Alabama to just win 55-0 or something like that. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Alabama's game is that's going to be a lot closer than people are expecting. Not because Alabama's not good. It's just because I just feel like Alabama's going to be overlooking Cincinnati a little bit. I feel like Georgia is coming off of a pretty embarrassing loss. And I don't think Michigan is as good as people think they are based on what we've seen. Yeah, you beat Iowa. The fact that you played Iowa in your conference championship game says everything we need to know about your conference championship or your conference.
Yeah, Purdue beat Iowa.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's going to be Georgia and Alabama, and I think Georgia's going to handle business on Michigan. I don't think that the matchup doesn't even work for Michigan anyway. I mean, Georgia's defense, their defensive line is ridiculous. Yeah, it didn't look great against Alabama, but that's because it's Alabama. Literally every other team in the country that Georgia has faced, they have destroyed them. And when Michigan is in that conference, like you said, halfway through the season, Michigan was struggling against teams they should not have been struggling against. And that's fine. They got past them. But what we're talking about is going up against a top-tier SEC team with a top-tier SEC defense, with top-tier athletes, 5-star recruits that are probably sitting on the bench in Georgia right now. I think they're going to handle business with Michigan. I think it's going to be ugly.
Yeah, I think that Michigan just doesn't match up well against Georgia's defense. Michigan is not a team that's going to throw the ball around a lot. And we just saw what Bryce Young did. And I think that's where the weakness is for that Georgia defense. And I think they really need to establish that power run game. I think Georgia's going to be well prepared to handle that. But I am with you. I want to see Michigan win, not because I have anything against Georgia, just because, I mean, I am a Big Ten guy and half my family's massive Michigan fans. But I also just would like to see that more than Georgia play Alabama again. I have legitimately no fucking interest in seeing that. So I really want to see Michigan, and obviously Harbaugh finally gets it done after years of not being able to beat Ohio State and subsequently not being able to win the Big Ten championship because of that. He finally does it. It's their first Big Ten title since like 2006 or 7 or something. It's like 15 years.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
Not tough competition. It's not tough competition at all. I see Young Rippa in the chat.
That's the problem.
I see Young Rippa in the chat. Easy. So basically Michigan is like Young Rippa, so like Michigan has been playing low competition, so that's like Rippa at Mario Kart 8 when he plays with the items on. It makes him think he's good, so they get all brash and talking shit, but then they're going to go up against an actual real team in the SEC, and that's no items. And that's what happened to Young Rippa last night. And I tried to explain this to him. Rippa is that normie Nintendo person that Nintendo loves. They're like, if we just throw a bunch of fucking stupid ass items in this game, and then dumb fucks like that can win, and then they think they're good. That's what Rippa is. He's Michigan. So I'll
be real. I was watching a decent amount of that, especially the no items. And the first map was, I don't know if you picked it intentionally, but obviously it was not favorable to Young Rippa.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite maps. Yeah.
But then on Neo Bowser City, you should have got beat. But both times he tried to pass you in that one corner, and he fucking drifted and fucking ran right into the wall.
But I hit the wall too. I hit the wall both times. No, both times. Both times I hit the wall. Because I even said it after the race. I was like, man, that was tough for both of us. Like, because I hit the wall both times. So did he. He just lost a little more ground than me.
He fucking ran right fucking straight into it, like perpendicular. Yeah. But yeah, there you go.
Good shit. It was good shit.
If you guys want to see Mario Kart, if you want to see Rippa talk shit and Jeremy talk shit about a children's game, every Sunday on the Geeks and Gamers channel and over on Twitch.
And I think we're gonna re-upload that to Geeks and Gamers Live, by the way, because I did unlist it because we got to start unlisting some of these live streams I'm doing right now. So we'll probably re-upload that to Geeks and Gamers Live. It's still there unlisted. You can find the link through Twitter and everything like that. Or if you watched it, you can go find your watch history. But I'll probably re-upload that full thing to Geeks and Gamers Live.
Yeah, there you go. King Roy. That's right, Nixon. Roy in the chat. The only person who's made Roy a relevant character is Eric.
That
July.
might be Rippa's greatest accomplishment in his entire career, making Roy relevant. He's the only person that's ever been able to do that.
if he can get Roy in, well, I don't think he's going to, because I think this last Mario Golf update is probably like the only one they were going to do. But if he can get him there, that'd be impressive. Speaking of impressive, the chat was screaming for him. The chat was about to just say, fuck this channel if he's not here. We got the man, Robert Barnes. What's up, man?
What's up, man? How you doing?
How you doing?
Good.
Did you come in right at the time me and Young Rippa's talking shit to each other? This is what we do. So,
but we just got done talking about, obviously the Alabama-Cincinnati matchup, Michigan, Georgia. What do you think about this college football playoff? I don't think there's really any room to complain about it or say, oh, it should have been this. I think it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, as it broke down, there wasn't much debate about who the top four were once Alabama beat Georgia. I mean, had Alabama lost to Georgia, then the debate would have been triggered.
That would have been some chaos.
But I mean, it was that game went as we talked about last week. The two big questions were, how would Georgia's defense go against an elite passing offense? Because pretty much in the modern era, last half decade, the elite defenses have not been able to stop good passing offenses. You look at the Alabama Clemson games, when LSU in 2019, no matter who they played, You look at a lot.
Alabama's always struggled against like a mobile quarterback that had a high passing attack, like a Johnny Manziel's, Cam Newton. Alabama's always struggled against them.
I mean, once you have elite pro style offenses in college, beginning about 14, 15, no matter who it is, even elite defenses don't stop them. And that's what came out again. And the reason why I was on Alabama was that is that there was really only one big talent differential on the field, and it was at quarterback. And I've never been a Stetson Bennett fan. I think he's a manager. He could win you a title back in 2000, something like that, when Oklahoma won with a very mediocre quarterback play. But you can't have that disparity just turned out in spades. I think their only chance is if they shift. I think they can beat Michigan with anybody, but I think assuming it's a rematch, and that's what the odds are, and I don't think either one of these games is going to be competitive. Cincinnati's not going to be competitive at all. That's going to be 17, 20 points.
What I was saying about that, and obviously Alabama's a significantly better team than Cincinnati. I do think, as an Alabama fan, one thing I've seen, like sometimes Alabama plays down to their competition more than I get comfortable. You know what I mean? And so, I kind of wonder if they're coming off a high with this amazing Georgia game, and I think they're going to be looking ahead because Cincinnati isn't really deemed a threat. Obviously, Saban's going to do his best to battle that, and that's one thing he does a good job of trying to continuously battle that narrative. But I think the game might be a little more competitive than people are expecting, but Alabama's still going to win easily. Whereas I think Georgia can handle business with Michigan pretty easily.
Yeah, saying Nick, there's just too big of a disparity in talent. You have two really elite teams in Alabama and Georgia. Ohio State could have been in the mix had they made it because they have elite talent, but Michigan does not. And Cincinnati.
Ohio State would be a way better matchup for Georgia than Michigan, because they have that passing attack. Michigan doesn't. Michigan is going to try to line it up and ram it down their throats, and that's just not going to work against Georgia, I don't think.
No, that Georgia run defense is elite, and and I think a rematch would be interesting because in the second half, Georgia did realize they had to bring pressure. They could not rely on their front four. That what Kirby Smart said at halftime: if you don't get to Young, then Young gets to you. And in the second half, Alabama's offense put up 10 total points. So it was not anything like the first half effort. I think the key, though, is they got to shift and go to the USC transfer at quarterback because he can stretch the field. Bennett cannot consistently stretch the field. And by that point, George Pickens will be really healthy. He'll have had 3-4 weeks to get back into the lineup, and he's an elite receiver. And I think another injury to Alabama, it hurt him a little bit in the second half, but I think it'll hurt him more in a rematch, assuming there is a rematch. I think a rematch, will be a tight, close game between Alabama and Georgia. I would be shocked if it's anything other than Alabama and Georgia in the title game. It would. You look at these teams that have limped into the playoffs. Notre Dame. Washington that year. The year Clemson had a mediocre passing game. They get killed when they get
smacked.
Michigan State. Remember when Michigan State limped into the playoffs?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's just not a good, the talent shows up in bowl games and definitely in the playoffs. I can't remember the last legit, there have been some upsets, but the upset was a very talented Ohio State team under Urban Meyer. It was a very talented Clemson team against Alabama in a couple of games. Those teams were elite talent level. Michigan is not. Cincinnati is not. They limped in because of coincidence of what has happened during the season. So I think that I think the Vegas expectations ultimately will be fulfilled, and I think they'll exceed them. I think Alabama and Georgia are going to roll.
Have you seen any early spread numbers on those?
Yeah, Alabama's favored by 13.5. I would have put them at 17.5.
Yeah.
I just think Cincinnati, people look at that Cincinnati Georgia game last year, it was very misleading. If you look at the stats, Georgia killed them. Georgia's just had a few untimely mistakes in key positions, but statistically, Georgia should have won that game by 20. And I think that's what's going to happen here. It's just Ritter is basically Stetson Bennett, and Cincinnati's run game is not Georgia's, and Cincinnati's defense,
nowhere close.
Very smart defense, but nowhere near Georgia talent wise. I think Alabama's just going to crush them, and My recollection when Saban has played these kind of teams in this situation, the regular season he can get tripped up, but in the postseason he's tended to crush these teams. Like you look at some of the SEC title games where a lot was on the line against a weaker opponent, just crushed it. And it feels like it's going to be that kind of way again. And the same with Georgia. I get Michigan's been on a good roll down the stretch. Also, you got to factor in Harbaugh. Harbaugh has been terrible as an underdog coach. I get he won this year at home against Ohio State, upset Wisconsin on the road, but Wisconsin's quarterback situation was still a debacle at that point. It's only partially improved.
Wisconsin was like 1-3 to start the season or whatever, right?
Yeah,
something like that.
Lost to Notre Dame, lost to Penn State. And, the Penn State loss in particular doesn't look great given Penn State finished on a low turn. Mm-hmm. So I just don't – Michigan wants to run the ball, and that's what Georgia's built. The defense is built to stop old-school offenses, and that's what Michigan, while being, under Gaddis described as a new offense, it's really an old-school offense.
I see you Michigan fans. I know you're upset, but listen, this is just called reality, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are basically playing like minor leagues up there, okay? This is the SEC. This is the big leagues, okay? Nick Saban's walking into town. Kirby Smart's walking into town, okay? So I get it. You beat Ohio State. Congratulations on that. You beat Iowa. Your conference championship was against Iowa. I want you to think about that. You barely beat these mediocre teams halfway through the year. You're barely struggling. Jim Harbaugh's been there how many years now? How many years has he been there? 6,
9,
7,
8,
9?
something like that.
Yeah, like he's finally done something. Congrats. It took Nick Saban 1 year to turn Alabama around, and he has not looked back since. But it's taken Harbaugh in a weak, mediocre, garbage conference where Urban Meyer had another heart attack or wherever he left, and it still Harbaugh couldn't take advantage immediately. So I understand you're upset. I understand this is your moment. I understand that this is the first time you've won a conference championship since, I don't know,
2004.
I think George Bush was president back then. Okay, that's the last time you won a conference championship. So you're rolling into the big leagues now. So enjoy it while you can, because the SEC is going to smack you out of existence.
Yeah, it's just talent
I will
disparity is
say
too big.
I'm not going to totally disagree with everything you said, but Michigan is coming in the right way. That they struggled.
Oh, yeah.
We went through their schedule. They struggled the first 6 games of the year. They really did against people like Rutgers, but to the same token, Alabama struggled, to be fair, against better competition like Tennessee and Florida, not Rutgers, but they still did struggle at times. But Michigan's coming in the exact right way with that blowout victory over Iowa, that massive win over Ohio State. Hopefully they can keep it rolling, because I personally want to see that. I don't want to see an Alabama-Georgia rematch.
I would rather see Michigan-Alabama. I would. I just don't think it's going to happen. I can't wait. If that happens, I will be talking so much shit to Portnoy on Twitter. I will be going after him. But I don't think that's going to happen. That's just the reality.
No, yeah, it's just a mismatch in talent. The talent level is just not there. And historically in the playoffs and in other big bowl games, when there's this degree of talent disparity, talent shows up. I can't remember Georgia's favored by 7.5. I would favor him by 14. I mean, it's just that big of a gap between the talent on these teams. And it would be one thing if Michigan happened to match up in a problematic way.
Right. That's my thing with it. That's my thing is Michigan is built to run the ball. That is what has really been very effective for them. Now they've had some pass opportunities off of that the past couple of weeks specifically, but that's how they are built. And I don't think they're going to be able to do that against Georgia.
Yeah, agreed.
No.
I would I think best odds for national title, because it's shifted so heavily now to Alabama, is probably in Georgia. The best odds are Georgia. I would say it's 50-50. I would say 45% chance Alabama wins it, 45% chance Georgia wins it, 8% chance of Michigan, 2% Cincinnati, something like that. I mean, they're real long shots. But the only value, I think Alabama's at 50% plus 100. So that basically makes, but Georgia was like plus 300 something like, and so Georgia was the one where there was some value. There isn't on either. I mean, go back and find. You have to go back to like 1991 to when a team like Cincinnati won the national title, and that's when we didn't have this playoff system. That's when we didn't have even a BCS system. So it's just you don't see teams with this degree of talent gap win a national title. You just don't in the modern age. There's a reason why Alabama has won so many, and you have so many elite programs, and you see it also reflected in the coaching ranks. I mean, we have 8 of the top 15 programs are going to have new coaches next year. National title winning programs. Miami has a new one. Florida is a new one. LSU is a new one. Notre Dame is a new one. Oklahoma is a new one. USC is a new one. And then you got quality programs like Washington, Virginia Tech, and TCU that are also going to have new ones. And then that's on top of, first-year coaches at Auburn and Texas. So, why is that? It's because there's so much pressure to win and to win national titles at those programs. And because of the way money has shifted the ball game in college football, it created a big haves and have-not scenario where the top 10, 15 programs in the country are just at a different level. And the top 3 or 4 are at a way different level. It's like what USC was in 04. 03, 04 when USC was just at a whole different level. I mean, but these Georgia and Alabama teams are more talented than those great USC teams. You're talking about almost everybody starting. It will likely make a roster at some level. I mean, 2/3 of them at least will make an NFL roster or draw an NFL paycheck at some point. Yeah. Michigan has maybe 8 or 9 guys that's true of. I mean, does anybody think their quarterback's ever going to play in the league? I mean, there's no chance of that.
It's kind of shocking he's playing in the Big Ten as a quarterback, to be honest, sometimes. But I think that also their ability to now make money for these athletes only will exacerbate that difference in talent. Because now, all of a sudden, Bryce Young, your Alabama quarterback, you're going to make $1 million because you're the quarterback of Alabama. That's just not going to be the same thing for someone at Purdue, for someone at Illinois. That's just the way it works. And that's one of the reasons when the discussion has been had for so long about potentially paying players, I've been saying you get a lot of inherent value even after graduating simply from being the quarterback for USC, simply for being the quarterback from Notre Dame. That has a lot of gravitas behind it, whether we're talking NFL or not, other opportunities. So, that makes a big difference now because these guys know I can go to Alabama and get the money.
Yeah, 100%. And, like you said, it doesn't matter who, even if you're not at Bryce Young is a great quarterback, a great college quarterback, but even if you're not, you're still going to carry a lot of, attention if you're the Alabama quarterback, regardless.
We didn't know what the hell Bryce Young was going to do. We had no idea what Bryce Young was going to do this season. You know what I mean?
Well, but he was highly recruited coming out of high school, very highly recruited. He was expected to be what he is.
But before he had been the starting quarterback at Alabama, already had $1 million in endorsements.
To give some sense of comparison, Alabama and Georgia have more than 40 players that were considered NFL prospects coming out of high school. In other words, top 150 prospects. Michigan has about 15. I mean, that's not a talent gap you make up. It would take a shocking upset, and Cincinnati has single digits. So I mean, it's and Cincinnati eked out a win against Notre Dame, and I get Notre Dame was highly ranked, but this was not a very good Notre Dame team this year. Right. That was a Notre Dame team that struggled to beat a bunch of people.
When we talked about it before we got here, if they had lost to someone else randomly that wasn't Cincinnati, Notre Dame would fucking be in there. There's no way the college football playoff committee wanted to put Cincinnati in if they had any other option.
No. And I think it will be the only question will be if both of these games are blowouts, what people think of should we have an expanded system, so on and so forth. I mean, you have basically 2 teams that are just way above everybody else. Now, Ohio State could arguably have been there, and if Clemson could have figured out their offensive on paper, Clemson had the talent to do something. Their offense just never matched up to it. But it's just that it's 2 things. The talent gap is massive, and then these teams schematically don't match up well. Cincinnati does not match up well against Alabama. And Michigan really doesn't match up well against Georgia. Michigan would have been better playing Alabama than Georgia, because Alabama at times has been shaky in some spots, whereas Georgia,
secondary,
they live on their run defense. It's one of the greatest run defenses of all time. It didn't show up as much against Alabama because of their great passing game. You had to shake up. Georgia had to change their whole defensive structure to deal with the passing attack of Alabama, which again, every modern team has. But for Georgia to win the national title, they probably need to bring in Daniels. They've tried with Stetson Bennett, but they played it. The SEC East was down this year, especially from midseason on. Once Florida fell off the wagon, and they did by the time of that Georgia game, and there were a lot of things broke a certain way for Georgia to make that game more of a blowout than it maybe would have been otherwise. But Missouri was down, Tennessee was decent, but not great. South Carolina was first-year coach. Kentucky was decent, but again, not great. And LSU was down. So I mean, and Auburn was also down in the first-year coach. So Georgia's didn't have to play Alabama or A&M, two of the better teams, or Ole Miss, or Mississippi State. So Georgia dodged some of the better SEC West foes that could pull an upset here or there. And then Clemson, of course, was down offensively this year. But I think if it's Georgia or Alabama's to win or to lose it, and I think we'll probably see a rematch. What's interesting is in the old system we wouldn't have. It would be Alabama, Michigan in the national title game, and I think that would have looked like Alabama. Notre Dame.
That's why I don't like the college football playoff. I think that if you go back and watch college football all those years, it almost always gave us the perfect top two matchup. It always gave us the right matchup. The playoff to me complicates things more than anything. And in the old system we would have right now, it would be Alabama and Michigan, which is a better matchup for TV ratings. A better
that's
matchup.
The more correct matchup.
So, I just think that we didn't have a problem back then. The right teams always ended up in the championship games. Typically, it's just always how it worked out.
Yeah, I think the projected score of Alabama Cincinnati is 36-23. I don't think Cincinnati's getting to 23 against Alabama. I think it's going to be something like 40-17. And Georgia's the one they expect to be closer. It's amazing the reversal. They go from being touchdown favorites against Alabama to all of a sudden they're probably going to be at this point 4 or 5 point, maybe even up to 7 point underdogs if there's a rematch.
They need to stop making Georgia the only person that gets favored over Bama, because it never ends up well for Georgia. Just give
out. Well, I mean, that was the first time anybody's been favored against Alabama in 8 years.
Since Georgia 2015. So there's only been two times since 2009 that Alabama has not been the favorite. It was 2015, and they beat Georgia 38-10, and then last Saturday where they beat Georgia once again. That's the only two times. That is insane. That is crazy. That will never be duplicated.
But talent-wise, I mean, he's built just a monster there. Saban has. I mean, they are the most talented team in the country and have been every single year since 2008. Definitely since 2009. 2008, you could argue about Florida, but at least since 2009. And not only that, often now Georgia this year is very, very close to Alabama, but in most years there's a significant gap. The only other year there really wasn't was the year Urban Meyer won with Ohio State. That was a super talented Ohio State team. A lot of those guys end up in the league, and with particularly for his system. If you had an athletic quarterback, you could really, in Urban Meyer's system, do damage. But we'll see. But I mean, amazing coaching carousel. I mean, you're going to have Oregon have a new coach.
Because Oregon, Cristobal's going down to Miami. That just happened a couple hours ago, right?
Yeah, well, Brian Kelly's proven to be the perfect fit in Louisiana with his accent and everything. On that note, I'm gonna have to bounce because I have another stream I'm gonna have to be hosting, and then I'm doing the premium stream for our geeksgamers.com members as well tonight. So Robert, good to talk to you as always. I got a question for you, Robert. It'll be off air, so I'll shoot you a text later tonight. I got to run something by you. So you guys have a good stream, talk football. And I know someone in the chat was saying, I hate your Kansas City Chiefs. I don't hate the Chiefs. Mahomes is my fantasy quarterback. He keeps getting me like 6 points, though. Come on, Mahomes. Figure it out, man. I don't hate the Chiefs. I just think Mahomes is kind of overrated. That's all. I think he's a really good quarterback. But I think that the systems, everybody's catching up with that system right now. So I don't hate the Chiefs. I hate the Packers. Robert doesn't like it for that reason. So, all right, everybody, have a good one. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye, everyone.
All right. See you, Jeremy.
Bye.
Yeah, and I guess we talked a little bit about it the other day, but before we kind of do move on to the NFL, do you think the 8-team playoff will happen, Robert, eventually?
I think so. They're slow playing it right now, but my own favorite would be for a 10 top 10 with the top 2 getting buys. That there's got to be something for buys. And then the idea would be if you had a top 10, all the major conference champions would have an automatic bid, and then you would have 3 or 4 at-large bids. And I think, and they could even integrate the bowl structure into that. Some of the smaller bowls could become earlier games.
Yeah, some of the bigger non-BCS bowls. Yeah.
Exactly. So you can incorporate the Peach Bowl and the Citrus Bowl and the Outback Bowl and some Cotton Bowl. Some of those you could be quarterfinal matchups. I think it would be fun because you could always have basically a group of 6. You could even guarantee one spot for the top group of 6 conferences, which arguably the Big 12 is heading towards, not being a Power 5 conference once Texas and Oklahoma are gone. And I think it would be, it would just add a couple of games to the schedule, and it works for every lower level of college football. So I don't know why it wouldn't have to work here. And you could also, if you wanted to, incorporate some sort of home field for the 1 and 2 seeds for maybe a playoff game, something like that. But I think that route, ultimately, I think the money will drive it. I think there'll be monetary interest in that will exceed the current money that goes to the bowls. And I think it would add some interest to the college football postseason. And like a team like Utah might be really interesting. I mean, they just tripped up early when they got a new quarterback. They just rolled over people, rolled over Oregon twice, rolled over Arizona State. So somebody like that could catch fire in the postseason, college postseason. So I would be for a little bit more of what than the top 4 that we have currently. I think the top 4 has value, but I would prefer something like a top 10 type. It'll allow some surprises, more underdogs, more Cinderella stories, and reward conference titles. That if you work hard enough to get a conference title, it's an automatic bid. Now, like this year, that would mean Pitt would have a shot. That would mean Baylor, that had a thrilling game, literally came down to a game of inches. Barely missed the Oklahoma State, barely missed the winning touchdown by about 3 or 4 inches. Stuff like, that would add, I think, a little bit more drama, a little bit more value. You have a little more teams that think they have a shot. And I think that would probably be good for college football. And now it would also, people might not want it in the end because it would guarantee that no matter what happens in Alabama's regular season, they'll always be in the top 10. Even if they had lost 2 games, they would have been in the top 10. And Alabama is just such a machine. Only elite talented teams have beat them, like Clemson, like Auburn, when they had Cam Newton and Malzahn, like Georgia could, and Georgia's, and maybe they will ultimately. We'll see that rematch happens. And then of course Clemson when they're good. But I think ultimately I would be in favor of that. But it's a sign of where things are. I don't know if if you look at it, basically about 15 programs since 1996 or so the last quarter century, have dominated the national championship picture. And those programs, to have 10 of them have first year or second year coaches is really extraordinary. And especially that people would leave big programs. Cristobal left elite program Oregon for a potentially elite program Miami. Kelly leaves elite Notre Dame for another elite program LSU. Riley leaves an elite program Oklahoma for another elite program USC. What it is a testament to is that Oregon, despite all their money, it's really hard still to recruit because they don't have a local recruiting base. And even though recruiting has been more and more nationalized, Cristobal prefers the easy recruiting terrain of South Florida to all the easy money that Oregon provided, which a lot of people didn't think he would ever make that move. And then you look at Lincoln Riley, for all the talent and history and tradition of Oklahoma, still doesn't have the talent of USC. He's also probably looking at, does he want to compete in the Pac-12 or SEC every year, given Oklahoma's going to the SEC? And what does Riley do? He turns down LSU and hops over to USC. And then I think Notre Dame fans are still shocked that they would lose a coach to another program, because I don't think they've ever had that happen.
That is never happened ever for Notre Dame. And I mean, until the last few years, they hung on to their coaches for quite a while. You know what I mean? So it was kind of the standard that you were just going to be the Notre Dame coach until you weren't, until they they got died, rid of you, until you died or retired, or they got rid of you. And so I mean, I think that was shocking for a lot of people there.
Brian Kelly wants to win national titles, and he doesn't think he can at Notre Dame. And he's right. Notre Dame, Lou Holtz said at the end that the academic standards were too strict for modern recruiting at Notre Dame. If they were going to keep imposing those academic standards, that Notre Dame was not going to be an elite competitive program. And the truth is, it hasn't been. Brian Kelly's had them overperforming. That he's managed to get them into the playoffs without elite talent. I mean, who's the last
their
NFL
schedule
quarterback
helps.
at Notre Dame?
Their schedule is very helpful with that. You know, the fact that they are able to so meticulously control exactly who they play and where, and then they just automatically kind of get put into this category by all the people that are rating them for some reason. I think that has had a large part to do with their success and how they're able to get in these games, and obviously money. You know, obviously money is a big part of that as well, because even if Notre Dame might not belong in one of these bigger bowls, they get invited anyway, and they get fucking annihilated because they just don't belong there. But that's been the story of Charlie Weiss and Brian Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, Kelly realizes the only place he's going to win a national title is a place like LSU, which has a much, much bigger talent edge. But it will be a shock to Notre Dame fans. They won't be able to. They just, that doesn't exist in their world. Also, I think Notre Dame fans underappreciated Brian Kelly. In other words, a Notre Dame each year should be 9-3, 10-2, somewhere in that neighborhood. They shouldn't have 12-0 seasons. They shouldn't have 11-1 seasons because they'll play at least 3 or 4 programs that have comparable talent, and an average coach loses half of those games. Brian Kelly was good enough to where he was winning 3/4 of those games. But the problem was every time he faced a truly talented team in the playoffs, I mean, the only talented team he's ever really beat was Clemson at home last year. And then they returned the favor and crushed him in the ACC championship game. So they're just not on the same par talent-wise, and coaching only gets you so far. I mean, that's what Mike Leach has shown in Mississippi State. For all of his creative offensive schemes, he's still going to be a middle-of-the-pack SEC team. The Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, for as creative as that offense is, they're still going to be a middle-of-the-pack SEC team. I think Josh Heupel's done great things at Tennessee. Very unlikely they're ever going to be competing with Georgia or Alabama. There's just the talent gap is too big. And but at LSU, Brian Kelly looks at LSU, and 3 different coaches have won national titles there in the last 15 years while he's been coaching elsewhere. And it includes guys like Les Miles and Ed Orgeron, neither of whom are considered Hall of Fame coaches. So he figures all he's got to do is show up, keep that Louisiana talent in state, and give it coaching discipline, and they'll be back very quickly, and he actually has a shot at the national title. Who I think it hurts the most is good quality coaches and recruiters being at programs like Texas, USC, Miami, and LSU is going to hurt the other programs. Not Alabama so much or Georgia, but it will hurt the programs that like to poach. Because there's a lot of programs, even like your Cincinnati's, when they can go and poach South Florida because they have mediocre coaches or recruiters, or they can poach them from Texas, or they can like Oklahoma's probably going to be in real trouble. Because if Sarkisian really tunes it up in Texas, they're going to run into difficulties. And there's programs like TCU had guys like Sonny Dykes who can really recruit, things like that. And they're entering the SEC on top of that. Might not. I mean, I think they made a great hire in Venables, probably the best defensive coach in college football the last 20 years.
Well, we actually got a Streamlabs about that from Butter Biscuit, who's one of our big OU fans. Super excited about Brett Venables coming back to OU. Going to hopefully bring the boom back to Boomer sooner, baby. And curse my Steelers, giving me hope. Keep trying to tell Lamar, can't get it done. When it matters, go Steelers.
That was a great win by the Steelers. Give credit to Big Ben. And credit also to Big Ben to realize that, he's barely holding on. So that he's like, this is my last season. And then credit to him to recognize that. And so then, rally the team around him for his last season. And they rallied around him yesterday in a good way, an impressive way. Good to win. I mean, Lamar Jackson's always going to be a bit of hit or miss because he's a very unique style quarterback.
By that, you mean a very inconsistent passer, if that's what you mean by unique?
He's never going to be a in the pocket QB. And so it's that unique offense. And I think what's hurt them this year is unreliability of their running game. Yes. So it's just him. They really don't have a great run. They've had running back problems, injury problems all year. And I think they are when their running game is working, he's very difficult to deal with. When their running game is not working and you're making him more of a pocket passer, that's not his strength. And he'll be erratic. And that's because he has a very unique passing motion, all of it. Now, the advantage is he throws exceptionally well on the run. So and he's such a running threat that it's hard to pressure him in a conventional way because you have to stay within your rush length.
Yeah.
But it's a lot easier to handle Lamar Jackson when the running game is not dominant. And I am curious. I mean, they gamble a lot on that defense. They're one of the most man-oriented defenses left in the NFL. And that, Big Ben was able to burn him a couple of times, and that was enough. I mean, it's really the NFL's hyper competitive this year. Even though, you got 4 or 5 legitimate, high quality, elite caliber teams, but even they've lost 3 or 4 games, whether it's Tampa Bay or the Rams or the Packers. I think the up and coming team we'll see tonight on Monday Night Football. Now, because there's supposed to be crazy wind, the total is dropped. They think it's going to be like a low scoring, 20-17 kind of game. I still think it's going to go over the total because normally this total would be around 50-51, given how good both Allen and Mac Jones have been. I think it could change things. But how is the wind still crazy? Yeah,
it's not as bad as it maybe was earlier that you could see there, but they're expecting 25 to 35 mile an hour kind of sustained winds with gusts of up to 55. That is not insane. A situation where you can throw a football with anything other than
that's why the
passes.
total's going down.
It should,
and usually high wind games are low total games. But I'm already stuck on the over, so I'll stick with it. But I do think Jones is quietly becoming not only a good quarterback, but he's showing the possibility of being the next elite quarterback. His statistical improvement from the first 6 games to the next 6 games has been very, very impressive. So
they're doing all the right things with him, and they are Bill Belichick. Right? They are using him exactly the way that they should be using him. I said it on Sunday with Jeremy. You can say that about any quarterback, right? They need to be put in the right position. You can't put Tom Brady back and have him run Lamar Jackson's offense. You don't want Tom Brady running RPOs or it's not going to work. By the same token, a lot of times these guys get drafted as rookies and it's all about, we got to change him. Like Justin Fields, right? Who are like, he's got to be able to work under center and do all these things when a guy like hasn't done that ever, but you're drafting him and trying to change him instead of putting him in a place where he's already positioned to succeed. And that's a problem that a lot of coaches have when they get young quarterbacks. That's not going to be the case with Mac Jones. They got him specifically because they knew he fit in this offense, even if he wasn't strictly the most talented guy. But his decision-making skills are the most important thing to Bill Belichick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what he showed at Alabama was I thought he would be better than Tua, and ultimately he was because of that decision-making. My view about NFL quarterbacks is arm strength is overrated. Decision-making is underrated. Peyton Manning never had a strong arm. Brady's always had a strong arm, but he was not as strong arm as Drew Bledsoe, but he was a lot better quarterback than Drew Bledsoe because he anticipates defenses, because the modern NFL is about anticipation from the quarterback position. That's what I mean. Jackson has a great arm, but his anticipation can be erratic. And the difference between the elite quarterbacks and the average quarterbacks in the league is their ability to anticipate defenses when defensive coordinators are coming up with new game plans every single week. And you have to adjust on the fly. And it's only your super smart quarterbacks, your Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, obviously Tom Brady. Those are the guys who can adjust on the fly incredibly fast. They make, quarter-second decisions like that. And Jones is showing that capacity because usually quarterbacks in his position as a rookie without really any high-quality receivers. There's almost nobody on that. There's nobody you would naturally draft fantasy number 1 in that entire receiver list for New England. And yet
Hunter Henry's a big value for them. Hunter Henry was a big pickup for them when they got him from the Chargers. And he's a safety blanket. He's really talented, and he stayed healthy this year for the most part, which is great for Mac Jones.
We'll probably see a lot of screens because they love the screen game with Bolden. And Bolden, honestly, Bolden and Henry are their best receivers are a running back and a tight end. Jacoby Myers and they've had some really good seasons, but you look at them athletically, they're not guys that are and you look at Jones, he's putting the ball in tight corners with them. They're not getting open naturally outside of scheme. They don't beat a player one-on-one Henry can if he's lined up against a linebacker. But they love the screen game. And in this kind of weather, I would expect a lot of screens tonight. So if people have late fantasy football adjustments, that would probably be it. But that kind of 25, 30, I mean, 50, at the 50-mile-per-hour gust, that's insane. That wind can be a crazy unifier, which usually increases variability in a football game outcome. It doesn't always go really, it tends towards the under, but this under is already really low and it keeps dropping. I think it's at 40.
Is it 39.5 when I looked earlier? So it may continue to drop for sure. And
yeah, if people see this weather, it'll be like at 36 or something by kickoff.
Yeah. And that's the unfortunate thing too, I guess, about this, because this is a huge game. This is a very big game for playoffs, for this division, and for the MVP race, to be honest with you, because Josh Allen is still one of those guys right there, still in the running for the NFL MVP, along with Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers. You can throw Kyler Murray in there, but I think missing 3 games is kind of probably makes it for him, even though if maybe he'd played all 16, he might have been the guy, or 17 now, he might have been the guy. But I'm a little disappointed we're not going to see a clean game between these guys. Instead, it's going to be a lot of handoffs. They can take negative 35 degrees. They can take snow. That's not a problem. The wind is the problem. And when it's 35, 50, it doesn't matter whether you're throwing into it or whether it's with you. You're kind of screwed.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what kind of coaching schematic adjustments they make for this, because we don't see this kind of crazy weather games very often. Because contrary to conventional wisdom, rain and snow actually don't usually impact the game that much. People think it does, but it doesn't really in the modern age. It's wind that has the really dramatic effect. And if that wind stays that way, it's going to be loco. It's I mean, right now, New England is the number 1 seed in the AFC, which is, and given their history of dominance in the playoffs at home, that matters a lot, especially with a rookie quarterback. I mean, if they could win this game, they are in the saddle to maintain first place. Whereas if they lose this game, then Buffalo, I think Buffalo may even grab first place. But at a minimum, New England loses their first place. So I think it should be a good matchup. But it'll be actually more coaching now than before because of the weather. Now, theoretically, this hurts New England more than Buffalo because Allen is such a strong-armed quarterback and is very mobile. So, but New England, on the flip side, again, New England loves the screen game, and this kind of weather is designed for a screen game because that's a much more manageable passing situation. But yeah, I'll be curious to see. Otherwise, the running game is better for Buffalo than New England. Big thing for Buffalo is they lost one of the top corners in the whole NFL this year, just last week. I can't pronounce his first name. Tredavarius, I think it is.
Tredavarius, it's tough sometimes. It depends where they put the apostrophe.
But that's going to be a huge hit. NFL defenses these days depend on corners and defensive ends to be a quality defense. And when an elite corner like that goes down, or you lose them for any reason, like in the offseason, you see those defenses suddenly regress. And so I expect Buffalo's defense to take a step back without him. They'll need Allen to have an MVP season to make a good deep playoff run.
Yeah, and I do think for Buffalo, Josh Allen does have a great arm, but that has resulted in Buffalo throwing downfield. If you look at the numbers, they throw downfield more than maybe anyone else, and they really push that heavy. So it's going to be a big adjustment for them if they are going to do more inside stuff. Maybe Cole Beasley might have a big night in the slot for them, something like that. That's a guy who I could see, if you're talking fantasy-wise, Cole Beasley might be a guy who really benefits from a game like this from a passing perspective, maybe more than anybody else, any other wide receiver on the field, potentially.
And New England's run defense has been gutted at times this year, but the counter to that would be you would assume Belichick is going to come in and scheme. And if he does one thing as well as anybody in the league defensively, is he takes one thing away. He can take your number one thing away, and he'll probably assume in this weather that is the running game. So he'll probably stack the box, and we'll see how that turns. At times, New England's running game has been good. It's not been great, but at times it's been good. So it'll be, if it becomes a slugfest, really in a weird weather game, I favor the coach. So I think Buffalo's only favored by a field goal anyway, which probably makes sense. But if it went higher than a field goal, then Belichick would be a tempting bet in this kind of game.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to stay right around there. I don't think that's going to move too much because I don't know how many people are going to have hopping on it one way or the other in a game like this. They're probably
Yep.
just going to drive that over under down. So,
Yep.
But we have a couple other super chats, guys. Lar for $20. Thank you very much, Lar. We appreciate you. The Squid for $2. Didn't Bama need 4 overtimes to beat Auburn? They did indeed.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
They did. But betting on that happening again with Cincinnati is not something I would recommend.
Yeah. Well, even you look at what's Auburn's talent level compared to Cincinnati?
Way above Cincinnati.
Yeah. Austin Cruz for $2. Thoughts on the Oregon head coach going to Miami? We talked about that a little bit.
It's because Cristobal is from Miami. That's where he played. But what it really shows, it's an ongoing debate in college football. And I've been on the side of saying talent matters. Your access to talent matters much more for college football coaching success than anything else. That money doesn't match it. Market identity doesn't match it. None of that. Money doesn't match it. I've had this ongoing debate with Clay Travis, who thinks if Tennessee just unloaded all the money, that Tennessee would be a top 10 program again. I'm like, no, sorry, it ain't happening. Knoxville's not within a half day's drive of top 20 talent, least of all top 10 or top 5. And that's just so it ultimately, and that's what Brian Kelly going to LSU is all about. That's what Lincoln Riley going to USC is all about. And that's what Mario Cristobal going to Miami is all about. Because Oregon has a lot more money than Miami because of the Nike cash. They got the private planes for them, all the rest. But Oregon's still in Eugene. And there ain't a lot of talent in a half day's drive of Eugene. And for all that money, they could get good talent, but they weren't getting LSU talent. They weren't getting what Miami can be when Miami's at the top talent. The talent in South Florida is still, Miami should be in the playoff hunt every year. They should be a top 10 program because of how much talent. There's only about 8 programs or so that fit that category. Miami, Florida, Florida State, Texas, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Ohio State, Georgia, USC. That's your top 10 talented programs. And it's a major drop off to the next level. Michigan is down a level. Other programs are, Oklahoma is down a level. Oklahoma has overachieved because Texas has underachieved. Oklahoma needs Texas to be down to recruit in North Texas. Everybody needs USC and Miami to be down so they can steal talent from South Florida and Southern California. When guys like Osborne did well at Nebraska, Fulmer did well at Tennessee, you had a bunch of elite talent-rich programs were down. LSU was down during a large part of that stretch. USC was down during a large part of that stretch. Pre-Mac Brown, Texas was down for a portion of that stretch. Miami or Florida were on probation at different times during that stretch. You didn't have competitive programs in the Carolinas like you now do. So Clemson has overachieved, and Clemson overachieved in part because they could steal from Georgia and steal from some other places, which now they can't do as easily. Clemson especially stole from Florida because not only is this a reminder of how talent matters, access to talent matters more than access to money for college football coaching success by the admission and actions of the college football coaches themselves, but it also it's about to make it harder for everybody that doesn't have access, that needs to steal. So Notre Dame's going to have a harder time. Penn State's going to have a harder time. Ohio State, no, all those talent-rich programs will be fine because they have a rich talent base. But anybody that depended on stealing from some of those players, Clemson is going to. Now, I think Clemson, it'll be real interesting how Dabo Swinney handles this. His offensive coordinator has not handled things well. He just lost his elite defensive coordinator. And now his ability to steal talent from Georgia and his ability, once Kirby Smart was there, that started going way down. Now there's going to be elite recruiter at Miami. Maybe we'll see with Billy Napier if he becomes that at Florida. If Billy Napier turns out to be a real good recruiter as well, all of a sudden Florida shuts down. Programs like Cincinnati that have been the mid-tier programs that have been able to rise up the ranks by stealing talent from down there, that goes away. So it makes the rich richer and the poor poorer is the most likelihood. But it's the biggest. This coaching carousel has been the biggest reminder that the side of those of us who have been on the side of the debate that talent matters most in college football. Apparently, Mario Cristobal, Lincoln Riley, and Brian Kelly, who've been in coaching a long time, all agree with that because they made decisions that were all not about money, but not about media, but about access to talent. And because they realized that's the way to win. That's how you win it all.
Yeah, and it's not always about those 10 best guys that you got that you're able to manage to do everything you can with Oregon and get these 10 really talented guys. It's about filling out the rest of the 80 people that are on a college football roster. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And
Like
that's
when you're
the
Alabama,
depth.
your top running back, your top 2 running backs can go down, and the third string guy is elite guy. I mean, I remember when Tennessee got the Kamara from Alabama. I mean,
Yeah.
Kamara became a star at Tennessee, and of course, a star in the NFL. But he was 4th string at Alabama because the 3 guys in front of him also made the league. So the talent matters because injuries happen. Talent matters because somebody's going to do something AWOL, have off-field issues, other issues. So that's where you need the depth. If you don't have the, Clemson has been able to get by with mostly just elite talent at the top, but the moment they have an injury problem, boom, their season falls apart. And so that's where talent is critical. And I think probably the people that are the most distressed by these elite programs hiring elite coaches are going to be people. Dabo Swinney's now going to be under maximum pressure. Some other coaches in some of those other regions, Nebraska, Scott Frost. I mean, he was already on the hot seat. He got 1-year extension. Is he going to be able to recruit now that Florida's sewn up, Texas is sewn up, California is sewn up? It's going to be harder for all those programs to make any kind of run. You're just going to start to increasingly see a gap between the rich and the poor. But for me, I'm thrilled. I think college football is better off when Miami and USC are powerhouse programs. Not only because of the history and the traditions and the glamour and the competitive, it's just more fun to me. And not just to be Alabama dominating. And really the last half decade, it's just been Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State, and sporadically Georgia lately. I mean, that's basically been it.
Yeah.
It'll be better off if we have an elite USC and elite Miami back in the mix. And I think Cristobal will bring that.
That's what everybody. I think that's what everybody wants out of college football, and that's why people want to expand the playoff because they're tired of just Alabama. But at the end of the day, you can't. Alabama has performed up to that level. Like that's just the bottom line. So they belong where they've been. Whoopa Troopa for $5. If my fantasy team wins week 14, I'm in the playoffs. Justin Jefferson, 577 yards his last 4 games, killing it for my squad. I also have Justin Jefferson. I have Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson and Keenan Allen, who just got COVID, so I might miss a week, and Johnson from the Steelers. So I have 4 top 12 wide receivers on my team. Like I only played 3 of them, unfortunately.
They all had great weeks last week, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Cooper Kupp is just pure money. Obviously Justin Jefferson had a really good one. Keenan Allen had 2 touchdowns, so I was happy, that's for sure. And Kyler Murray's back. So my squad.
You wonder how good Joe Brady really was as an offensive coordinator now that he's been fired from the Panthers. Because you look at Burrow's success, you look at Chase, you look at Jefferson, I forget the third guy. And then Edwards-Helaire. You're talking about elite Pro Bowl caliber NFL players all on the same college football team. Maybe it wasn't that hard to have them excel.
Yeah, that's true. And he did get that job because of that 2019 team. There's no doubt about that. And I really like watching Burrow. Now, he struggled a lot last week against the Chargers. He actually got a little banged up at one point, but I think he's going to be really good over the next decade, which is exciting when you get a good young guy like that. But yeah, Justin Jefferson's a fucking monster. And then Whoopa Trooper 5, also Sick'em Bears. That goal line stand got me hard. Would like an extended playoff, but I don't want it to make the regular season irrelevant. Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons Robert was talking about, specifically a bye. Some incentive for these guys to get that top 2.
And give the conference champion an automatic bid. Kind of like college. I think if college football playoffs, they'll never be quite March Madness, but the more they have some March Madness attributes, I think the better it is for college football as a sport.
Yep. Butter Biscuit for 2. TJ get an MVP when he beats the sack record. I think that TJ Watt could get 30 sacks and probably wouldn't win MVP. But that's just my personal opinion. I think Tom Brady is the leader in the clubhouse when it comes to NFL MVP, which the idea that a 45-year-old is likely going to win NFL MVP is insane to me. Is there anybody you think might come in there and take it from him with these next couple weeks in the NFL?
I think if Stafford got on a roll, like they win the rest of their games this year, then I could see him stealing it for the Rams. but not where he's at right now because he's gone to a tough stretch. And then Aaron Rodgers is still game for it, though. There's going to be people in the league bitter at him over his vaccination choices.
Yeah.
So that he may be politically blacklisted from it. I think it's Tom Brady's to lose at this point. I think Brady would have to have some mid-late season struggles, or somebody else would have to go nuts. I think you're right. Kyler Murray missing the games he missed. If he hadn't, he would be it'd be neck and neck with Brady. But I think they need he needs to bounce back. Two quarterbacks that have really had off years that were the preseason were heavily in the hunt. Not only Mahomes, which everybody has noticed, but there's been less public commentary on it. But Russell Wilson. I mean, the Seattle bounced back and won this week, but their offense is still shaky. And it's like, how did Russell Wilson go from near MVP status year in, year out to being 4-8? And some of those losses while he was out, but even after he came back, something's wrong there in Seattle.
He came back too early. I believe he came back too early because he had a hand injury, and so he was out. I think they said 4 to 6 weeks. He was maybe like 4 to 8 or something like that, and he came back after 4. And he just did not look the same. But I think they've been fighting a losing battle there for years in Seattle. And they've been leaning heavily on him to have these big games and throw the ball a lot. They've gotten so far detached from what made them successful in the first place, which was a great elite all-time defense and a very strong running game. And Russell Wilson making good decisions and making good plays. They've completely gone the opposite way. Now they rely on Russell Wilson throwing the ball 45 times a game.
It's the power that, the salary cap ultimately did achieve its objective, which was to break up talented teams, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. That if you can keep they probably thought, you look at New England and we can replicate it. We keep our quarterback and we can surround him with mediocre talent, and we can let our defense lose a lot of top people and we'll still be competitive. But that Brady-Belichick connection was an unusual combination.
Especially when Brady decided to take way less than market value.
Yes, correct.
That's a huge part. That is, one of the biggest reasons that this is able to happen. That was able to happen was because you had a guy who was, unselfish. And you can talk about Giselle all you want about the money she makes. At the end of the day, all of these guys, you're talking those guys, they could easily take 30 instead of 40 million. Easily, and still be fine for the rest of their lives, but they don't, because it's a status thing.
Yes.
And for Tom Brady, that wasn't a concern for him.
Exactly. It's how much do you want to win versus how much do you want to put cash in the bank. And some guys are win oriented and some guys are cash in the bank oriented. And the cash in the bank guys usually pay the consequence in winning on the field, and sometimes ultimately in the cash too over the long haul, because winning is what leads to the big cash. But particularly in the advertising market. But so, I mean, we'll see. But I think it's really there's a lot of teams coming down the stretch that have a chance. You have about half the league, that a little more than half the league, that has a legitimate shot at the playoffs at this point. Which is really,
especially with 7 teams now.
Yes.
That's a huge difference in this year as well. The fact that we have 7 playoff teams, that's definitely a game changer.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right. I should modify that. It's basically 2/3 of the league, 3/4 of the league is still in the hunt for the playoffs.
The Bears are still we're still in the hunt up until this game. They're like 4-8 or something. Like, come on.
Yeah, bad luck for them, I guess, that Kyler Murray started. But I mean, what are they doing at quarterback?
I mean, you're talking about the Bears. I mean, Justin Fields is injured technically. I personally think the offense looks better when Andy Dalton's playing.
Yeah, it does.
And they still have Nick Foles on the freaking team, I think. So they have 3 quarterbacks that are all effectively the same. They drafted Justin Fields. I don't know how you keep Matt Nagy after this year. I don't know how you do it, but you let him and Pace draft Fields. So you let them dictate the future by drafting Justin Fields. I don't know what's going to happen. The Bears don't fire people mid-season. That's just not something that happens. But it is crazy that after all these changes you had, you fired Lovie Smith after a 10-6 season. And it's crazy that we were all the way removed from that, and that's where we're at now. But I I want to be excited for Fields. I wanted to be excited when they drafted him, but the entire time I've had a bad feeling. It's just not a good fit. He's one of those guys they're trying to change. When you bring someone in and spend that kind of draft capital on them and then put them in the starting role almost right away, due to injury, because people wanted him. Come on. We all knew they wanted him. Dalton would only lasted 3 or 4 games, even if he didn't get hurt. And to me, Fields just doesn't look like the guy, at least not in that offense. You got to change the offense of the system.
And I mean, and none of those Ohio State Urban Meyer type quarterbacks have really made it. You know, they're designed for the college game, and there's no proof that they're really pro style quarterbacks. And I think, you know, there's only, you know, Jackson and Vic, those kind of guys are very unique athletes that can, and Baltimore completely changed their offense to fit him.
Exactly.
And at times Atlanta and to some degree even Philly did the same for Vic. That, you know, I never was sold on. I mean, Fields lost out in the battle in a pro style battle in the collegiate level at Georgia. That's why he went to Ohio State. So that was a sign that maybe he's not. And then you look at what Northwestern did to them in the Big Ten championship. You know, put a little pro style pass defense, and all of a sudden he can't throw the ball. So you know, big reasons to doubt that was ever going to work. So but you know, we'll see.
Yeah, I guess we'll fucking see. That's the life of a Bears fan.
Well, at least
how many
the Lions
first-round
fans had
picks?
something to celebrate. They acted like they won the Super Bowl just because they finally won a game. It was a great way to win. Last play of the game, 20-yard touchdown throw. But it was amazing watching. I mean, they were like almost tears of joy because they finally didn't blow a game.
Well,
so
and
like life could be terrible, but you could still be a Lions fan. It could be worse.
That's how. So last college football game I went to, I think, a long ass time ago, probably like 8 years, maybe. It was maybe around 8 years. Purdue. I went to West Lafayette to see Michigan play in Purdue back when Denard Robinson was on Michigan.
Oh, wow.
And he was just setting records, and he had a crazy game, like 200 yards rushing or something like that. Purdue got absolutely the shit kicked out of him. But when they updated and everyone realized that IU lost, that Indiana had lost that week, everything was right with the world. Chance of IU sucks just started rolling, and everybody felt good about themselves because even if it's bad for us, at least they're having a worse day. And that's what the Minnesota Vikings were to the Detroit Lions on Sunday. And Detroit fans got to be happy that they're not going to lose 16 games. You know, that would have been, the third time in their history they'd lost 16 games. So they're going to avoid it by the skin of their teeth, it seems. But to be fair, they've had a lot of really tough losses. They're not as bad as their record indicates. I think they're much more. I think they should have about a 4-8 record like the Bears do, because we saw that they're pretty close to the same team in that Thanksgiving game. But just a couple bad things have gone their way. So Justin Tucker made that like 67-yard field goal.
Yeah,
God, what are the odds of that happening? But
ended up in a tie with the Steelers. I mean, it was like one thing after the other. But
I picked them to win that game. I picked them to win that game on Sunday. I said, I have a feeling about the Lions. They're not as bad as everyone thinks. They're going to win. And if I get a tie out of that, I'm going to take that as a victory, to be honest. I might as well, at least. Let's see. Mike Hill for $5. Will there be a downfall for Clemson defense without Venables?
I'm very curious to watch that. So we're going to find out how much a coordinator matters. Venables been one of the best in the game for a long time. You know, Oklahoma had good defenses when he was there. The moment he wasn't there, their defenses fell apart. So will the same thing happen at Clemson? Now, Clemson recruits very well on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah. Offensively, they depend on their top players staying healthy. Defensively, they usually have, 8 or 9 elite players on that defense. Now, they can't withstand too many injuries, but they have been they're very talent rich. So they're less likely to drop off than Oklahoma. What Oklahoma's defense was, even during Venables and Stoops era, was all often scheming because they often did not have a lot of elite talent. They had a hit or mix combination of talent. But I think the other big question with Venables is how well can he recruit? The assumption is that he's a good recruiter. He's very familiar with the region. It's heavily North Texas. I think he'll turn out to be a good recruiter. So I think Oklahoma won't miss a beat probably. But Clemson, the combination of the offensive coordinator problems this year. Now you lose your defensive coordinator, and you add to that your talent-rich recruiting regions are drying up fast due to high-quality coaches going to those places. I mean, Kirby Smart's locking down Georgia. Now you're going to have to deal with Cristobal, and Mullen was never a serious competitor recruiting-wise. He was never a top-tier recruiter. Great offensive mind, never a great recruiter. The same was true for a lot of the predecessors. I mean, since Urban Meyer left, that Florida has not had an elite recruiter.
That's why they've had so many coaches.
Yeah, they have. If the Louisiana Lafayette coach Napier, if he turns out to be, and he has shown signs of it at Louisiana to be an elite recruiter, then man, he has. And then you have Mac Brown, who's really recruiting well at North Carolina. It's going to be tough. What we're going to really see how elite is Dabo Swinney, because the assumption has always been Dabo's biding time for Saban to retire and go to Alabama. And in Alabama, all you got to be is a good recruiter, and you're going to have talent. And if you're an elite recruiter, you can lock it up. But Clemson doesn't have that much talent in South Carolina. They have to dip into North Carolina, dip into Georgia, dip into Florida. If they cannot dip into those places, you're going to see Clemson take a tumble.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Dabo. You know, he's getting paid so much right now. So, yeah, if that does happen, after this disappointing year, and then all of a sudden you get a couple transfers, you start losing out on some of these big recruits, and it can tumble quickly. We've seen it happen in college football.
He doesn't like to recruit into the transfer portal. He's going to have to reconsider that because I think, you know, they took a hit last year, and I think they'll take another big hit. The other assumption is Venable's going to Oklahoma. Some of that Clemson defensive talent is going to follow him in the transfer portal. So this next year is going to be the next year in the second year after are going to be real big years for Dabo Swinney. Can he keep Clemson in the top 10 while losing key coordinators and while recruiting gets a lot tougher?
What do you think about, real quick, I just popped into my mind, what do you think about basically none of Brian Kelly's assistants wanting to go with him to LSU and deciding to stay at Notre Dame?
I think it's twofold. One is Kelly's always been kind of a hard ass. So he hasn't had a reputation as a guy that it's enjoyable to work for. Snyder was this way at Kansas State. You know, a lot of these really super overachieving coaches at lower levels of competition or capability or talent
just step on a lot of people to get there, kind of thing.
Yeah, and they're just tough people to work for. And so it doesn't surprise me for that reason. The other reason is a lot of the people that are at Notre Dame are there for Notre Dame and are Midwest, have no Louisiana ties. Yeah. So, they would be starting from scratch. And I'm sure, the defensive coordinator, I'm sure offered him, to stay on board. And if I was an assistant, I would stay at Notre Dame rather than go down with Kelly, because I'm at Notre Dame. Freeman, by all estimations, was made to be a head coach. Everybody knew he was going to be a head coach at some point, a little bit quicker than they expected, but he has all the signs of being a quality coach. So they'll still be 9-10 win kind of seasons. I don't.
Seems like the players love him. I love that video that was going around of how intense that was. So that's always a good thing to see. But the fact that Brian Kelly asked people to come in for a 5-minute goodbye meeting at like 7:00 in the fucking morning.
That's Kelly. He's just not a personable guy. He never has been. Very acerbic personality. Now, normally that does not translate to recruiting well. He's managed to continue to recruit. He recruited pretty well for Notre Dame. At LSU, all he has to be is a high quality coach, and the talent will come. Like Spurrier was never a great recruiter, but it didn't matter because his coaching acumen led to players wanting to play for him because of his success on the field. So I think Kelly's success as a coach, but he'll need to hire some quality recruiters. But you don't have to do a whole lot because LSU is just, the whole state of Louisiana bleeds purple. So consequently, you don't really. I mean, even Jerry DiNardo did okay at LSU. When Nick Saban got there, he inherited a top 5 talented roster already. All he had to do was make him perform. And that's true for Kelly. Kelly walks into a situation where they already have top 10 talent on that. I mean, Orgeron had 2 top 5 classes in the last 4. So it's just really about coaching discipline. They'll be an elite program right away. And that by itself will likely lead to enough talent being there. But I could see people not wanting to make a dramatic shift. Like going from Notre Dame, I think almost his entire staff was Midwestern in origin. His whole history is Midwestern. I mean, it was Central Michigan, Cincinnati, then Notre Dame. He He's
Yeah.
he's Catholic, so that helps with the part of Louisiana that's Catholic. But he's as foreign to LSU culture as could be. But so was Nick Saban when he went down there. Nick Saban had no Southern ties. It doesn't matter because it's Louisiana and they love LSU.
At least he's got the accent now. Maybe that'll help him. That was so cringe. But yeah, very interesting to say the least. What we're going to see unfold the next few seasons in college football with all these changes. And obviously the NFL is going to be unpredictable, just like tonight's game is going to be very unpredictable. But it's getting underway now. So we're going to sign off here.
It's probably a good alternative point spread game. Sometimes the higher variability you get, then then the alternative point spreads kind of can work. So, but yeah, I'm just hoping a high scoring game. I'm hoping New England puts up points despite the weather. So that's what I'm cheering for tonight.
We'll see. New England's pulled a lot of trick plays out of their bag this entire season. There's been a lot of wide receivers throwing the football there. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure it's going to be crazy tonight. Robert, what do you guys got going on at sportspicks.locals.com?
Yeah, so everybody can get free football picks and predictions for the whole rest of football season. We're going to be having our bowl previews. We'll be posting bowl previews here at Sports Wars for all the different bowls as they're set, individual playoff matchups as well. Once those get set, they're already set for college, but once they get set down the road for the NFL. But yeah, so far, depending on what happens tonight, if tonight goes well, then we'll have even another profitable week. If not, then it'll be only the third losing week out of 15 weeks. So 12 winning weeks. People who have followed the picks have already more than doubled their money on the season. So you can get free football picks and predictions for the rest of the season at sportspicks.locals.com. And now we have NBA picks we'll be putting up in college basketball picks too. So made some money on Duke pulling the upset on over Gonzaga's 3-1 underdogs back in Vegas here a couple of weeks ago. So still having fun.
Yeah. There you go. Make some money over at sportspicks.locals.com. Thank you guys for hanging out. We appreciate it here on Monday Evening Quarterback. We'll be back same time next week. See you guys then. Peace.